Well, Merry Christmas, y'all. Merry Christmas to our brothers and sisters at Lake Mary and Waterford, to the men and women at 33rd. Merry Christmas to you all. We made it. We are the furthest that we will ever be from hearing Christmas shoes again. Most people think I'm joking when I talk about Christmas shoes, but I'm not. It really does wreck me. It just destroys me. And it's a problem because I know it's a poorly written song, and I know it's poorly written music, but yet I can't turn it off. Like if I'm in the car and it comes on, I can't turn the dial. And every time those kids' voices come on and start singing, I'm undone. I am completely a wreck. Even today, coming here to the church today, the song came on as I pulled into the parking lot. And you know what I did? I sat in my car and listened to the whole song. Santa, he did not know about Christmas shoes when he made the better not cry stipulation for gift giving. Because, I mean, really, we want Mama to look good tonight, especially if she's going to meet Jesus. Speaking of which, how's that for a segue? If you've been with us for the past month, you know that we've been looking at the genealogy of Jesus, that we've been looking at his family as a way to prepare to celebrate his birth. And in particular, we've been looking at the genealogy as listed by Matthew in his gospel, and we've been looking in particular at the women listed in the genealogy. And what we've seen through these women's stories, we've seen who Jesus is. We've seen why he came. We've seen what we can expect out of him. If you're new to Christianity, if you're just checking things out, or if you're just completely opposed, but you felt bad about turning down the invitation from a friend today, I want you to know maybe what you've heard about Christianity or Jesus has been wrong. Maybe you've heard that Christianity is about being good and presenting your goodness to God as a way for God to reward you. Maybe you've heard that Christianity is about certain people being in and other people being out. Maybe you've heard that if you find yourself on the naughty list, Christianity is not for you. Well, my mentor, Steve Brown, he often says, that's a lie from the pit of hell and it smells like smoke. And it's true. That's not true. If you want to know what Christianity, if you want to know who Jesus is, you look at his family and you see that his family is broken, messed up. His family is a real family. If you came today, especially if church isn't your thing, I'm going to try not to get weird, but I want you to know the story that continues to change me. And it's a story that involves a very unlikely woman, actually a young girl. The last woman listed in the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew's gospel is Jesus' mother, Mary. I don't know if there's anyone more unlikely than Mary. Like I said, Mary was a young girl. She was probably a young teenager, in that awkward stage between childhood and adulthood. She was poor. She came from a poor town, a kind of nothing town. It was way far away from the center of power. It was the kind of town where you have to drive like 45 minutes to get to the Applebee's, that kind of town. In fact, in the Gospel of John, a remark is recorded by someone who said, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" So you got Mary, this nobody, from this nothing town in the middle of nowhere. And yet, nobody is nobody to God. Mary, this unlikely peasant girl, would become the mother of the Savior of the world. And as my favorite preacher calls her, Charles Spurgeon, he calls her the first Christian. And when I read that, I thought a lot about that. That idea intrigued me. And I wanted to know, what does that really mean? And does it mean anything for us? You see, being a Christian is simply being a person who believes in Jesus and says, like Mary said, I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled. So I started thinking about Mary, and I started thinking about her response to the angel. And in looking at her response, I began to see what I think it means to become a Christian. Again, I don't want to get weird, and if you're here and you're not a Christian, I'm not working myself up into some huge altar call at the end of this service. I'm not going to ask you to stand up or raise your hand. But if you decide that Jesus is who he says he is, maybe during the service or maybe years down the road, and you decide you want to become a Christian, I want you to know how. See, I grew up in church. I went to church all the time, Sunday school, youth group, and it was just kind of expected that we were Christians. But I don't remember anyone ever really walking me through the process, showing me what it looked like to actually become one. So I had to kind of figure it out on my own, and I think it took me about 10 years to become a Christian. But if I had looked at this story of Mary, I think I would have known the process. So an angel comes to Mary and says to her, "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." Right from the beginning, we see grace. And if you know me, I'm all about grace. I love grace. And actually, the word that the angel uses for favor here comes from the Greek word grace. Now, there's some misunderstanding about Gabriel's greeting. Some believe that when Gabriel said that to her, he was worshiping her for being full of grace. Well, that's a misinterpretation. It was not that at all. Mary was not the source of grace, but rather the recipient of grace, of an amazing grace. In a sense, the angel comes to Mary and he says to her, "Oh, Mary, you are blessed. Oh, we have a gracious God. No woman that has ever walked the face of the earth has been shown as much grace as you." And Mary's response, "Oh, what an honor. How humbling. I don't deserve such grace." No, she doesn't respond like that at all. In fact, she responds in a very real, earthy kind of way. The scripture tells us she was greatly troubled. She was greatly troubled at the angel's words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. And in the Greek, the word wondered means literally to logic through something, to analyze it, to rationally think. What's Mary doing here? She's doing what you and I would do if an angel appeared to us. She's thinking about it. She's questioning it. She's saying to herself, is this real? My mom was right. I shouldn't have put those mushrooms in the soup, right? She's sitting there and she's thinking, is this a hallucination? Can this be? Is this real? You see, God had been silent for 400 years. God hadn't spoken to his people through a prophet or an angel or a vision since Malachi. So this event, this angel appearing before her, would have been astounding. She would not have expected it. So she had to logic through it. You see, Christianity begins with thinking logically. So maybe that's where you are, and that's a good thing. Maybe for a while you've been wrestling with the claims of Christianity. That's good. Now, Christianity is more than thinking, but not less. Christianity is more than just thinking, but it's not less than that. In fact, C.S. Lewis, the great Oxford historian and atheist turned Christian, said that the reason he believed in Christianity was because nobody was brilliant enough or crazy enough to think it up. If the claims of Christianity trouble you and make you wonder and cause you to think, that's a good thing. Keep logicking it through it. It's an important step in becoming a Christian. And then Mary asked, "How will this be since I'm a virgin?" Well, that makes sense, right? Mary asked a question. I think questions are one of the bravest things that we can do. Now, there's a way to ask a question in a way that ends the conversation, that's cynical, that's dismissive, that's cowardly, that just says, "How can this be?" But there's another way to ask a question that invites relationship. Because that's what questions do. Questions invite relationships. See, Mary is sitting there and she's taking in what the angel's saying to her, and quite frankly, it seems crazy. But instead of holding those thoughts inside, she brings them out and asks them. She exposes her doubts. She asks a question which invites relationship. See, in asking questions, exposing our doubts, that means we're open to a conversation. I always assumed growing up in the church that questions were for people who didn't believe in God or who were trying to disprove his existence. And so I spent a lot of time not in relationship, carrying around all my doubts and questions because I didn't think there was any place I could bring them. But yet, if I had just looked at the mother of Jesus, I would have seen that I could bring him to him. That in fact, my questions don't take me away from God, but move me towards him. And then the angel responds to Mary's question with this: "For no word from God will ever fail." That's Luke 1:37. Now, the NIV translation is the only translation like that. Almost every other translation, it's for nothing is impossible with God. And it's a pretty famous verse. You might have heard it before. And so when I was using my NIV Bible to kind of study this passage, I realized that verse sounded very different to me than what I had heard. So I went and looked it up, and it is. It's translated very different. For no word from God will ever fail. And so I wanted to know why it's translated so differently. So I dusted off my old Greek textbook, which I really, it's hard. I don't like to do it because Greek's hard. But I did it, and I looked it up. And the Greek would have been translated literally something like this: "For no word spoken by God shall be impossible for him." For no word spoken by God shall be impossible for him. So really, either translation works. But this week, I found myself profoundly comforted by the way the NIV translates it. For no word from God will ever fail. Think about that for a second. Think about what that's claiming. And you and I, we have God's word at our fingertips. I mean, we could have it on our phones, right? I mean, we have it right here, easy access at any point. So like when I'm struggling with sin, when I keep failing, when I'm trying really hard to stop something, but I keep failing over and over again, and I think God's going to turn his back on me, I go to Isaiah 43:15, which says, I am he who blots out your transgressions for my own sake, and I will remember your sin no more. Or maybe you've been running away from God, right? And you're beat up and you're broken, and you're sure that God's punishing you. Hosea 6:1, "Come, let us return to the Lord, for he has torn us that he may heal us. He has struck us down, and he will bind us up. For no word from God will ever fail us." Or maybe just everything's going bad. You're just in a season of life where nothing's working out. And you think this is never going to pass. Ecclesiastes 3:1, "For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. For no word from God will ever fail." Or maybe you're just tired. I'm tired a lot. I'm tired for working so hard to try to earn God's approval, trying to please him, trying to measure up to what I think he expects out of me. You go to Matthew 11:28-30. "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." For no word from God will ever fail. Maybe you just feel all alone. Maybe you just feel like you're the only one. Hebrews 4:15, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. For no word from God will ever fail. Or maybe the pain's just too bad. Isaiah 25:8. He will swallow up death forever, and the Lord God will wipe away every tear from every face. He will remove the shame of his people from all the earth, for no word from God will ever fail. And how do we know that? How do we know that? Is because Mary was brave enough to ask a question. Because Mary was brave enough to expose her doubts. Maybe your question will bring the answer that someone else's heart desperately needs to hear. Becoming a Christian looks like thinking logically. It looks like asking questions, exposing your doubt, and it also looks like relationship. The angel's response to Mary was, for no word from God will ever fail. But he also said something else. He said, your cousin Elizabeth, who's old, who's beyond childbearing years, is with child. What's he doing there? Well, I believe the angel's kind of prompting, he's encouraging Mary to go and process everything she's just heard with Elizabeth. Part of the process of becoming a Christian always involves relationship. Almost nobody comes to God without it, without processing the claims of Christianity with someone who knows a little bit more, who's been walking it a little while longer. And our hope here in this place is that we would be a community where you can question, where you can doubt, where you can bring it all, where you can belong before you believe. I hope you have questions, and I hope you'll come back. And I hope you'll see this as a safe place to jump in. We don't ask that you agree with everything that we believe. We just ask that you're open to taking the brave step of asking questions that invite relationship. And lastly, Mary surrenders. She says, I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled. Mary becomes a Christian by saying yes to God. What's she saying yes to? Well, she's saying yes to a pregnancy and all the pain that comes with that. My wife's pregnant right now with our fourth child, and so I don't know what that pain's like, but I'm around it, and I do this, and this is a horrible thing that I do, and I think I'm confessing it to you all so that maybe I'll stop. But whenever she complains about like her back hurts, I'm like, yeah, mine does too. Stupid. But Mary was also willing to give up everything she loved and knew. Think about it. She was willing to give up the man, Joseph, that she was betrothed to, who she was going to marry. Because how in the world would he stay with her? How would he stay with her when she was pregnant with a child that wasn't his? And not only that, I imagine that being in a small town like Nazareth, she knew the gossip that would happen. She knew what life would be like for her child, that her child would be made fun of and probably called names because he was illegitimate. And in fact, that would happen. In the Gospel of John, in chapter 9, verse 26, the Pharisees say of Jesus, we don't even know where this man comes from. They knew he was Jesus of Nazareth. They knew the town that he came from. They were making a disparaging comment about his father. But that was just all the things that she could imagine. She could have never imagined all the other hardship. The journey to Bethlehem, 9 months pregnant on a donkey. The exile in Egypt to escape from King Herod. And then all that came when Jesus began his ministry. I mean, he was controversial. He stirred up trouble all the time. At one point, it gets so bad that Mary and the rest of his family even plead with him to just leave ministry altogether. You see, I'm sure it became apparent to Mary early on that her son was on a collision course with death. Mary could have never imagined what it would be like to suffer through his trial and through his crucifixion. If you've seen the movie The Passion of the Christ, what was the most powerful moment in that film? I bet you're thinking of the exact same moment that I'm thinking of. That moment when Mary is trying to push her way through the crowd to see her son as he's carrying his cross to Calvary. And then she finally gets a glimpse of him pretty far off in the distance. And as she does, he falls under the weight of his cross. And then all of a sudden we're in a flashback with Mary seeing Jesus as a 3-year-old falling down and crying out for help. And then the music starts to swell and we see Mary, the mother of Jesus, running towards her boy to rescue him. When she said, "I am the Lord's servant," she was surrendering everything. See, it's this last step in becoming a Christian where most people bail. I think you can logically get to a place where Christianity makes sense. I think you can ask hard questions and find that Christianity does offer answers. Not only that, it offers hope. And I think Christians, especially ones who get grace, create the safest, most welcoming, most committed communities that you can be a part of. But then you get to this idea of surrender and you think, but wait, if I become a Christian, does that mean I have to stop sleeping with my girlfriend? Does that mean I have to spend less money on myself? Does that mean I have to run my business differently? Do I really have to give 10% of my income to the church? Do I have to give up on my dreams? But you missed it. See, Christianity is not about trying to do better. It's about trusting God. It's about saying to God, "I'm yours. I trust you. I surrender to you. And whatever it is you ask of me, whatever you're asking me to give up or to take up, I'll do it because I trust that what you want for me is better than what I could want for myself." And see, that's what it means to be blessed. When Elizabeth looks at Mary and says to her, "Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promise to her." She's saying Mary's blessed because she trusts him. Because she said, "Whatever you ask, Lord, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to trust you completely." Elizabeth is not talking about some kind of hashtag blessed, right? The blessed in the scriptures, it means so much more than just a way to sort your tweets. Blessed has this idea of you being brought into the light. All the dark, lonely places in your life being brought into the light, the Lord's face shining upon you. When you're blessed, it means God's restoring you. He's restoring your humanity. What do I mean by that? To be blessed is to recover what God had in mind when he thought you up. All of our struggle and our pain is the result of us forgetting who we truly are. It's because we believed the lie of the serpent. We believed the lie that God has forgotten about us, that God doesn't want what's best for us, that God is withholding from us. But to be blessed means to be alive. John 10:10 says, "The thief came to steal and destroy, but I have come that they may have life and life abundantly." But we don't believe that. Why? Because like it says in the Jesus Storybook Bible, it's not a sermon if you don't quote it, we are told that when our first parents disobeyed God, a terrible lie came into the world that day. A lie that would live on in every human heart, whispering to every one of God's children, "God doesn't love me." C.S. Lewis once wrote, "To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your own selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable. So how did God crush the lie? He became vulnerable. God, the Almighty, the creator of heaven and earth, became breakable, became fragile. He became someone we could hurt. In fact, he became someone we would hurt. God became vulnerable to us. We don't surrender everything to God because we think he's going to take away things that we love, things that we need, things that make us happy. We see him as an almighty killjoy. So what does God do? Does he say to us, "How dare you think of me like that? Who do you think you are? If I tell you not to do something, don't do it. Live right." No. He becomes a baby. Martin Luther, another favorite preacher of mine, in a Christmas Eve sermon given almost 500 years ago, said, "God became a baby, for nothing is more appealing to the human heart than a baby." Luke 2, 1 through 7. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Matthew 1:21. And you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. For no word from God will ever fail.